Okay, lecture number 4, we're going to talk more about the male reproductive ducts and glands. Okay, so ducts are tubing compartments that have a lumen, and in this case we are talking about the male ducts. Their job is to carry sperm from the testes where they are made to the exterior. And so we've really already talked about what these structures are, but the male ducts include the epididymis, which leads to the ductus deferens or the vas deferens. That leads to the very short ejaculatory duct, and during ejaculation the sperm cells that are now located in semen are going to pass through the urethra to the outside of the body. And we've actually already taken a look at this picture, but again, this is reminding you of the system of ducts located at the beginning of the pathway. Obviously, again, here's a testis, and then all of this is an epididymis. And again, you can see there's a whole bunch of tightly wadded up tubules inside there through which sperm cells are passing and being stored as they leave the testis, as they leave those seminiferous tubules where they were made. And then the more mature sperm enter the ductus deferens or the vas deferens and head this way upward into the abdominopelvic cavity. They're going to leave the scrotum, and then they're going to eventually end up in the ejaculatory duct, where they're combining with the fluids from the seminal vesicles and waiting for an ejaculation to take place. So a little bit more about the epididymis and the vas deferens. Your textbook is going to provide a lot more detail about the tissues that compose these organs and so forth, but we're just going to kind of hit some of the highlights. All right, one thing you should be aware of: when sperm leave the testes and they enter the epididymis, they are non-motile. So that means they can't swim yet. So yes, they do have, here's a sperm head with the tail. That tail is also called a flagellum. And yes, they have those structures, but they're not fully functional yet. They're not whipping those tails back and forth adequately enough to be able to swim. And swimming is very important for a sperm cell, because sperm get deposited in the vagina of a female, and they actually have to swim all the way from there to the inside of a fallopian tube in a female, because that's where fertilization of an egg actually takes place, which we'll be talking about more later. So inside the epididymis, you've got 20 feet of tubing in there. So it takes them a long time to work their way all the way through the epididymis, about 20 days. During that time, they do mature and become motile, capable of whipping their flagella back and forth. Incidentally, that word flagellum is singular. Flagella is the plural term, referring to more than one. The epididymis does contract during a male ejaculation. I guess you don't really have to say male ejaculation, it's kind of understood. There are smooth muscle tissues within the walls of the little tubules in the epididymis, and that smooth muscle contracts, and that helps force sperm cells forward. So it helps force them out of the epididymis and into the ductus deferens or the vas deferens. In an average male, each vas deferens, remember you got 2 of those as well, one extending from each epididymis, and they're about 18 inches in length. They pass through the inguinal canal. That's the opening through the muscular wall of the abdominopelvic cavity that you have between the scrotum and the pelvic cavity. And as we've already seen, that leads to the vas deferens. The very end of it has a widened area called an ampulla. We've seen that term before as well. And that's going to lead to the ejaculatory duct. So the seminal vesicle has a duct, and that duct and the ampulla of a vas deferens combine together to form the ejaculatory duct. And during ejaculation during male orgasm, you have smooth muscle tissue in the walls of all of this duct work, and that's going to help continue to propel sperm forward from the epididymis through the vas deferens and then on into the urethra. A term you guys should be familiar with, vasectomy. When a male has a vasectomy, the vas deferens, each of the two vas deferens, are cut and ligated. That means that the ends are closed off, and so that's what's occurring when a male has a vasectomy, and nearly 100% effective form of birth control. If it's performed properly, there should be no way for sperm in the testes and the epididymis to leak out of one end of a vas deferens and wind up swimming into the other end of a cut open vas deferens. So if it has been performed properly, that is not going to happen. Also, I always have students who ask, well, what happens to the sperm cells? And remember, you have these phagocytic cells in your body called macrophages, and their job is to clean up not only infectious microbes that have entered your body, but also damaged tissues, old worn out tissues, things like your old worn out red blood cells, for example. And so the sperm cells, if a male has a vasectomy, still producing sperm, those sperm cells are, do their thing traveling through the epididymis, and they're entering the vas deferens and making it all the way to the point where the vas deferens was cut and ligated. That means kind of sealed or tied together. And so eventually those sperm cells are going to die, and macrophages are going to migrate in there and do phagocytosis and ingest and digest them. So if you're a male and you have a vasectomy, you do still produce sperm, but no, they don't just keep building up and building up and building up and building up until your testes blow up. They actually get reabsorbed through the action of your macrophages. Okay, and here's this diagram again, which is figure 27.5 from your textbook, and we've been through that diagram, so I'm not going to rehash that again here. All right, the urethra. I think we've probably talked about the urethra pretty extensively already as well. The urethra has two jobs. It has to convey or carry both urine and semen at different times. They're not supposed to be combined together. And why is that? Because urine contains wastes. It has a fairly low pH compared to other body fluids, and so urine is actually toxic for the sperm cells present in semen, so they're not supposed to be combined together. The urethra in a male is divided up into three regions. We've seen this before. The part that's passing from the bladder through the prostate is called the prostatic urethra. Now that portion of the urethra actually picks up the secretions of the prostate gland, which also end up in semen. The intermediate part of the urethra, that's a little short, stumpy part where it's passing through the muscular wall of the pelvis. And then it becomes the spongy urethra, where it's passing through the corpus spongiosum in the penis. And the spongy urethra opens at the external urethral orifice, as we talked about when we covered the urinary system. All right, how about these male accessory glands? So remember, glands secrete stuff. You have endocrine glands that produce hormones. You have exocrine glands that secrete substances onto surfaces, like mucous membrane surfaces, or onto the surface of the skin. And exocrine gland secretions have to have some exit point to the outside of the body along a pathway somewhere. Okay, so males have two seminal vesicles or seminal glands that are located over on the posterior side of the bladder. And then you've got two bulbourethral glands. They're little bitty tiny glands. The prostate is considered to be one of these accessory glands of the male reproductive system. And the fluids from these three glands compose the bulk of semen. So most of the volume of semen is not actually the sperm. They're actually a minor, they contribute a minor amount of the volume. Most of the semen fluid comes from these three glands. So another question that people sometimes have, if a guy has a vasectomy, will he still ejaculate semen? And the answer is yes, because the vasectomy is occurring down in the two vas deferens, and that's blocking the travel of sperm cells. Sperm cells can no longer make it into the semen, but your seminal vesicles, your bulbourethral glands, and the prostate gland are still producing their fluids normally, and that makes up the bulk of the semen anyway. So a guy's not even really going to see a reduction in the volume of semen after a vasectomy. A little bit more about the seminal vesicles. And again, they're on the posterior bladder surface. There are smooth muscle cells that are located in the walls of these vesicles, and so during ejaculation, when a male has an orgasm, those smooth muscle cells contract, and that squeezes the fluids that the seminal vesicles have produced and helps combine it with the sperm cells. So what's in this stuff? What do you have in the fluid from the seminal vesicles? It's very viscous, thick, alkaline, so it actually has a higher pH than normal body fluids, and there is a reason for that. What else is in there? Fructose. Fructose is a monosaccharide, a type of sugar. So why would that be in there? Fructose is in there to feed the sperm. The sperm cells have got to do all this swimming. That takes energy. They've got to make ATP, so fructose provides them a source of nutrients so they can do cellular respiration and generate the ATP they need to whip their flagella around. Also contains citric acid. There's a coagulating enzyme in there called vesiculase. Why is that necessary? So right after ejaculation takes place inside the vagina of a female, the semen is fairly fluid, and you need this enzyme to trigger a coagulation reaction that's very similar to what goes on with blood coagulation, and that helps thicken and hold the semen in place inside the vagina. That way most of the sperm cells, or a lot of the sperm cells, won't leak out. And there also are prostaglandins. Prostaglandins are signaling molecules, local signaling molecules that have many different uses inside the human body, but one of those is to promote smooth muscle contraction. So those why are those in there? Those are going to promote contraction of the smooth muscle inside the female after ejaculation takes place. Because the sperm cells, when they get deposited inside the vagina of a female, they need some smooth muscle contractions in the female to help propel them along. Yes, they're pretty good swimmers, but they need the female reproductive ducts to contract rhythmically and help propel them forward, because they've got a long journey up to the fallopian tubes where an oocyte that they can fertilize will be waiting for them if one is available. All right, the fluid produced by the seminal vesicles also has a yellow pigment that actually fluoresces with ultraviolet light, so it'll shine and glow if you hover an ultraviolet light over it. And why is that important? That's actually used in forensics at times. They'll look for evidence of semen having been deposited at a crime scene through using ultraviolet light. The seminal vesicles are pretty important. About 70% of the volume of the semen actually comes from those glands. And again, their exocrine glands have ducts, tubes that carry their secretions away from the gland, and so the ducts of the seminal vesicles join the ampulla, the widened portion of the vas deferens or ductus deferens, and that's what forms your ejaculatory duct. You just have one of those. You just have one ejaculatory duct. All right, how about the prostate gland? We hear a lot about the prostate on pretty frequently, mainly due to prostate cancer and other prostate problems that males can develop later in life. So remember that first part of the urethra passes through the prostate. The prostate is it's inferior to the bladder. It's about the size of a peach pit. And it also, the walls of the prostate have smooth muscle tissue that contract during ejaculation as well. And it secretes a milky, slightly acidic fluid. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention about the fluid from the seminal vesicles, why is that alkaline? Because the vaginal lining in a female is actually acidic, and which is good because that helps prevent the overgrowth of microorganisms along the vaginal lining in a female, so it can help prevent infections. However, that environment is not too friendly to sperm cells, so the bulk of semen consists of this alkaline fluid from the seminal vesicles. So when semen is ejaculated into the vagina of a female, the alkaline pH helps counteract the acidic conditions along the lining of the vagina, and that makes for a friendlier environment for the sperm cells as they start their journey. Okay, the prostate fluids are actually slightly acidic, but not enough to override the alkaline conditions from the 70% volume of the semen that comes from those seminal vesicle secretions. Various things in there: citrate, enzymes, prostate-specific antigen, PSA, which we hear about, and the reason you hear about that, males are supposed to have their PSA levels checked frequently once you reach middle age, because if you develop prostate cancer is pretty common in males, and prostate cancers develop from cells in the prostate that overgrow, they divide too quickly, and just like when we were talking about proliferative tumors and endocrine glands back at the very beginning of the semester, if you have a tumor that develops in the prostate in a male, those tumor cells overproduce prostate substances like prostate-specific antigen, or PSA, and there will be high levels of that inside the bloodstream of the male. So high PSA levels are an indicator or a warning sign sometimes of prostate cancer. Prostate-specific antigen does actually have a job or jobs. It seems to play a role in sperm activation. Okay, the fluid that's produced by the prostate during ejaculation, that fluid enters the prostatic urethra, that stretch of the urethra that's passing through the prostate, and then that fluid's going to flow from there to the ejaculatory duct, and it's going to combine with the other fluids that are already there to form the semen. So prostate secretions make up about 1/3 of the semen volume. All right, prostate disorders in males. Prostatitis, if a male has this, you are not supposed to have bacteria or other microbes in your prostate. So if they get up in there, you can have inflammation. The immune system's going to respond, and can be acute or chronic. Acute means short-term and usually more intense. Chronic usually means longer lasting, and symptoms are not always quite as intense, and you can usually take antibiotics to treat that condition. This is a very common problem in males: benign prostatic hyperplasia. So benign here means it's not metastatic, it's not spreading to other parts of the body. Hyperplasia refers to an overgrowth, an abnormal overgrowth of tissues. So the prostate increases in size, but it's not cancerous, it's benign. This is pretty common in males. Unfortunately, it distorts the urethra. That part that's passing through there gets squeezed, and it can make it difficult for a male to urinate as he gets older. There are different treatments that are used, like surgery. There are microwave therapies that apparently can help, certain drugs. balloon compression, radio frequency radiation. There are a number of different things that have been tried to help control that disorder. All right, now if an overgrowth of cells in the prostate reach the point where they become metastatic, they're spreading to other parts of the body, then you have prostate cancer. The second most common cause of cancer death in males, and the problem is not the cancer growing in the prostate, it's when those cancer cells spread to other parts of the body, like the brain, for example, that can wind up killing a male. Some males live with prostate cancer for many, 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 many years. It can be kept under control pretty well. Males are supposed to have digital exam screening, fingers up the rectum with palpation of the prostate to see if there are any growths on it. And PSA levels, as I mentioned, those are monitored. If they're abnormally elevated, then the male's going to have a biopsy of the prostate to check to see if there are any cancer cells that are present. Surgery, radiation, sometimes castration, so removal of most of the male reproductive apparatus can help treat this, and drugs as well. Castration means removal of the testes, of course, but in this case the prostate, where cancer cells might be located, would be removed as well. And there are other prostate cancer treatments that are being investigated. Cryosurgery involves super cold temperatures, like freezing tumor cells to death to kill them, and various types of chemotherapy, chemical drugs that are given to treat patients who have cancer. There are ultrasound therapies. I'm not very familiar with that, but apparently some of those are being tested to see if those can be used to kill prostate cancer cells, and proton beam therapy, which would be essentially like a similar to a radiation type treatment. All right, then the third type of accessory gland in a male are the bulbourethral glands, also called Cowper's glands. And these are little pea-sized glands. They're very small. They're inferior to the prostate, and they produce a very thick mucus during sexual arousal. So this is the pre-lubricant that is released from a male during erection, and it's supposed to provide lubrication for intercourse, lubricates the glands. And another function of this secretion, of these bulbourethral glands, is because you've had urine passing through the urethra. Urine has an acidic pH, and that's not friendly for sperm cells. That can kill sperm cells. And the secretion of the bulbourethral glands helps raise the pH along the urethra before ejaculation takes place. Okay, lecture number 5, we're going to focus on the male sexual response.